Hi friends, today I'd like to share with you an amazing storybook from Word on Fire that features some awesome adventures. Come meet a friar who tamed a dangerous wolf, an abbess who rescued a wounded boar, some monks that cooked dinner on top of a whale, and other incredible stories of holy men and women who befriended God's creatures. There are so many different stories in the book, but today I'll share with you a few of my favorites. Let's go!
Juice box!
Saintly Creatures by Alexi Sargent. Illustrated by Anita Barghigiani. The Boar and St. Bridget. A wild boar ran for his life through an oak forest. The beast must have been a frightening sight. Bristling black hair, fierce curving tusks, and 4 thunderous hooves pounded through the undergrowth. But just then, it was the boar who was frightened. He was injured, and a hunting party was on his tail. Soon there would be nowhere left to run. But as the boar charged through a gate and drew closer to a cluster of wooden buildings, the hunters came to a halt, reining in their horses and calling off their dogs. The boar, run ragged from the chase, was relieved. But why had his pursuers stopped their hunt? The creature had unknowingly entered the grounds of Kildare Abbey. This beautiful abbey had been founded by Bridget, who presided there as abbess. Bridget knew she was called to consecrate her life to God as a religious sister. She gathered a group of companions and founded Kildare Abbey. She spread the faith through generosity, missionary zeal, and miracles of healing. On the day the boar came to Kildare Abbey, Bridget was outside tending to the abbey's livestock. She spotted the wounded animal as he panted to catch his breath. Pitying the boar, she said to him, "Poor creature, have you come to the house of the Lord in search of safety? You have done well." She offered the animal a drink of water and sent word to the hunters that the boar would receive sanctuary at the abbey. She would protect him from harm. The hunters were confused. They sent a message back saying, "Abbess, it is only an animal, not some penitent criminal in search of sanctuary. Can we please have our boar back?" But Bridget was firm. "I will offer Christ's mercy to any who run to it at Kildare Abbey, whether on 4 legs or 2. The disappointed hunting party rode away that day without their prey. Bridget tended to the injured and frightened boar and brought it to join her herd of domesticated pigs. At first, the other animals squealed and ran from this wild creature, and the boar bristled with suspicion at the strange new herd. But Bridget spoke words of blessing over the newcomer, and he became quite tame, living out the rest of his days among the contented farm animals of Kildare Abbey. St. Francis and the Wolf. The town of Gubbio was full of fear. People barred their doors, spoke in whispers, and pulled their children close. A terror stalked the region, a great wolf, huge, fierce, and hungry. Many townspeople became afraid to venture beyond the walls of Gubbio because the wolf had grown bold enough to hunt any humans he saw. Who would free the citizens of Gubbio from this terror? As it happened, it was not a band of hunters or knights in shining armor. Instead, a little friar wearing ragged robes set out confidently to confront the beast. The townspeople urged the friar not to be so foolish. The wolf would surely eat him if he approached, but the friar was undeterred. The band of friars and onlookers set out for the lair where the wolf was rumored to lurk. Sure enough, the beast came bounding forth, letting out a ferocious howl, and then charging at the little friar with his great sharp teeth bared. The townspeople braced themselves to see the wolf gobble up their unlikely companion. Instead, the friar made the sign of the cross and commanded, "Come here, brother wolf, in the name of Jesus Christ, do no harm to me or any other." Miraculously, the wolf obeyed the command. He closed his jaws, approached the friar meekly, and settled down at the feet of Brother Francis. Francis said, "Brother Wolf, you have done great harm here, devouring God's creatures, especially humans made in God's image. The people wish to punish you for your crimes, but I will make peace between you and them. And if you offend no more, they shall forgive you. The wolf bowed his shaggy gray head as if agreeing with Francis. The friar went on to propose that the wolf would be given food by the townspeople in exchange for a promise not to harm any person or beast again. Francis put out his hand and the wolf put out his paw, and they shook on the deal. Then Francis led the wolf into the town, with a crowd of townspeople bearing the incredible story ahead of him. Soon the whole population of Gubbio was assembled to witness the terrible wolf now tamed. The wolf lived the rest of his life in Gubbio. He went door to door to be fed and never attacked another soul. The townspeople came to love him, and even the dogs did not bark at him. The Horse and Saint Jose Sanchez del Rio. Amidst the frenzy of the battlefield, a lone horse galloped furiously. Though his rider was only a boy of 14, the horse trusted him to guide them to safety through the chaos. All around, bullets were flying, smoke was billowing, and soldiers were stumbling around the bodies of the wounded and fallen. The rider held aloft a flag. It was green, white, and red, the colors of his country, Mexico. On the flag was an image of Mary as Our Lady of Guadalupe, and the words, "Viva Cristo Rey," long live Christ the King. The horse looked ahead and saw another horse, but that one would run no more. The fallen horse had been struck by an enemy's shot, and his rider was now on foot, calling orders to the panicked troops, but they were scattering fast and the enemy was closing in. The boy spurred his mount towards the unhorsed rider. He called down, "My general!" The general looked up at his young flag bearer and continued, "Take my horse and save yourself. You are more needed for this cause than I." The general reluctantly agreed. The rider leapt down, and the horse whinnied in confusion. The boy gave his horse a last pat. "Do not worry about me, my faithful friend. Get the general to safety." Mounted on the boy's horse, the general galloped away from the losing battle, escaping capture so that he could fight another day. The boy who had given up his horse fought valiantly, but was taken prisoner by the opposing army. That rider was Jose Sanchez del Rio. Jose's older brothers, Macario and Miguel, joined the Catholic rebel soldiers known as the Cristeros. But their mother did not want Jose to fight. After all, he was only 12 years old at the time. He pleaded with her, saying, "Mama, do not let me lose the opportunity to gain heaven so easily and so soon." His mother relented, but the Cristero general was also resistant to bring one so young into battle. Eventually, the general allowed Jose to be his flag bearer, and that is how 2 years later Jose came to be carrying a flag and riding a horse into a losing battle. Jose gave up his horse to serve the general. He would give up his life to serve Christ the King. The government's troops imprisoned Jose in a makeshift cell at the local church they had seized. In fact, it was the very church where Jose had been baptized as a baby, the Church of St. James the Apostle in Sahuayo, Mexico. His captors ordered him to renounce his faith in Christ, but he refused. He remembered what his baptism meant. Without receiving a real trial, Jose was sentenced to death. One of his aunts smuggled him Holy Communion while he was waiting for his execution. The soldiers tortured their young prisoner and forced him to walk to his place of martyrdom on wounded feet. But their cruelty could not defeat the young man's courage. All the way, he prayed the rosary and called out his battle cry of faith, "Viva Cristo Rey y Santa Maria de Guadalupe." Long live Christ the King and Holy Mary of Guadalupe. The Whale and St. Brendan. The waters of the North Atlantic were choppy and rough. A boat was sailing those waters, crewed by men in brown robes. 17 monks on a voyage of faith. "Look up ahead, there's an island," called out one monk. And indeed, a rugged promontory rose out of the sea before them. Though there was no easy place to dock the ship, the monks dropped anchor and swam through shallow waters to the island, grateful for a respite from sailing, especially as darkness was falling. One monk, their leader, stayed aboard the boat, deep in prayer all night long. The other men explored the island. It seemed uninhabited, even by plant life. They slept curled up on the ground, and when dawn came, they celebrated Mass, Easter Sunday Mass, in fact. For reasons they would learn later, their abbot and captain remained in the boat, saying his own Mass. The men gathered driftwood and brought out some salted meat and fish from their supplies. Soon they had a fire burning and a cook pot boiling, and then something strange happened. The island beneath their feet began to move like a wave. Suddenly, it did not feel like solid rock at all. They rushed to rejoin their leader where he waited for them on the boat. He calmly helped the panicking monks aboard, and they all watched in astonishment as the island swam away. They could see their little fire getting smaller and smaller as the island carried it off until it was just a pinprick of light. The abbot, Brendan, addressed his crew of monks. "Brothers, you are wondering what has happened to this island." The monks mumbled fearfully, and Brendan said, "Fear not. God has revealed to me the mystery, so I would be ready to get you aboard. This was no island but a sea creature, the largest one in the ocean. It is so long that, try as it might, it cannot bring its head and tail together. Its name is Jasconius." The voyage was something of a seafaring pilgrimage, one that required the monks to observe the yearly cycle of holy days. Every year they would return to spend Holy Saturday night and Easter Sunday morning on the back of their new friend, the great whale named Jasconius. As if to remind them of their first visit, the second time they landed on Jasconius, they found the cookpot they had left before. Now that they knew the true nature of the island, they were careful not to alarm the whale that way again. The pets of Blessed Carlo Acutis. Assorted barks and meows echoed through the elegant Italian home. A boy in his early teens chased his dogs and cats around, video camera in hand. The pets loved playing with the energetic boy, the only child of his family. The boy loved the animals right back. Does this sound like the story of a saint to you? You might be surprised to meet these pets and their young playmate after hearing stories of saints from the most distant past who interacted with animals you have only seen in zoos, lions and tigers, hyenas and wolves. But these Italian house pets were friends with a saint as well. Their friend was Carlo Acutis, an ordinary boy, but also a friend of Jesus who now intercedes for us with his prayers. Carlo had been baptized as a baby, but his parents were not very religious and did not take him to church. When he started to have questions about God and the faith, it was his Polish Catholic babysitter who answered them. She helped nurture Carlo's interest in God, and soon he convinced his parents to bring him to church regularly. First his mother, then his father, became practicing Catholics, pulled along by young Carlo's love of the church. Carlo led a busy life. He did all the things you would expect for a boy his age, hanging out and making jokes with friends, teaching himself skills like computer coding, playing with his cats and dogs. But he did a few things that went beyond that. He defended classmates who were picked on because of their disabilities, and he offered kindness to kids going through difficulties in their family life. He did volunteer work to help the poor and hungry, and he saved up his allowance to buy a sleeping bag for a homeless man he knew. And he centered his life on Jesus, going to Mass and adoration each day and asking his parents to bring him on pilgrimages to places where there had been Eucharistic miracles or where Mary had appeared to people. When Carlo was 15, he suddenly became seriously ill with blood cancer. In the hospital, Carlo offered up his suffering to the Pope and the Church. He comforted his mother by telling her, "I can die happy because I haven't wasted even a minute on things that aren't pleasing to God." On his website about Eucharistic miracles, Carlo offered rules for how to become holy. His number one rule was this: you must want it with all of your heart. And he lived this rule out. Yes, he loved video games and soccer, cats and dogs, and you can love those things too. But God was Carlo's first and foremost love. He understood how to give thanks to God by cherishing the good small things God made, like his animal friends. By giving God his heart, he learned the best way to love the wonderful world God made. Wow, I learned so much about those saints and their animal friends. You could read more about those saints and others in Saintly Creatures, 14 Tales of Animals and Their Holy Companions. I can't wait to hear about which saint and animal duo story was your favorite. Well, until next time, friends. Bye!
Goosebumps.